Hello, everyone. I'm Lonnie with Untitled Nerd Network, brought to you by Infinity Flux and your local Satanist out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Here once again, really with the honor of interviewing Brad Roberts of Crash Test Dummies. We interviewed you about a month ago in Charleston, West Virginia, and had a lot of stuff. And I was like, after it was done, you gave me a little bit of extra time, and much appreciated. And actually got us out here again. You know, like, hooked us up with tickets to come see you in here in Atlanta at Variety Playhouse, where we're doing backstage. And again, thank you for the opportunity to come out here to see the concert. This is a funny thing, because before the interview, or whenever we did the interview last month, I was completely unaware of what the Mountain Stage was all about. I was under the impression we were going to come in, we were going to see you guys do your full album and then the other songs, you know, because we're doing the 25th anniversary of God Shuffled His Feet. And we get there, you're like third or fourth in line to play. You do like 4 songs, and then it was over. And I was like,
wow, I drove a long way for 4 songs is probably what you really thought, because you drove how long that day? 6 hours?
It was about a 6-hour drive, 12 round trip. And I was like, that can't be it. Because I was totally unfamiliar with the format of the show. And now I'm very familiar with the format of the show. But you guys just...
Well, just to fill in there, by the way,
Yeah.
It wasn't just us doing 4 songs for the internet audience. Mm-hmm. There was a whole bunch of other bands playing as well, and a bunch of other music.
Yeah, I think maybe 5 different bands at one point. So
Mountain Stage is a tremendous show, and the fact that it is able to go and for this long, you know, especially in this economy, and they play music that is not an easy sell, you know, necessarily, and they're just fantastic. I'm really grateful that they exist. When we put out our first record, Mountain Stage had us... Did I say all this stuff in the last interview? When we put out our first record and we did Mountain Stage invited us to play. That was back in '91, before we had any popularity in America at all.
At that point, it was just The Ghost That Haunt Me.
Yes, indeed.
Because I remember, you know, they have a big list out front that has everybody who's ever played Mountain Stage. It looks like the freaking Vietnam Memorial Wall. I mean, it's like stretches all the way across.
I'd never seen that before until this time.
And they actually had a like highlights. You know, they'd have a paper or something that's like, hey, this is where tonight's performers have performed here before, and you guys were on there like maybe 4 or 5 times.
At least 3.
Yeah.
If not 4 or 5.
But anyway, a couple of things I want to get out of the way, since we're kind of pressed for time today, and things that I have to ask. We actually have a friend of ours. We got an email just last week from a fan of the show named Jonathan, and he said that he saw an interview with you at some point, probably 7-8 years ago, around the time Ooh La La came out. And he said that you told the interviewer at that point that I think Ooh La La had about 11 tracks, close to a dozen, something like that. And you said that not only did you have those 11 tracks, but you also had around 30 unreleased tracks from those sessions. And y'all apparently had some music that you were sitting on. And I think he quoted you as saying, oh, that's going to be good for a couple more albums. We haven't seen an album since then.
That's true. So here's what's going on there. We made about twice as many songs that are on the record when we put out Ooh La La. It wasn't actually 30 songs lying around, although 30 could be a number quoted from in a different context, because I wrote 30 songs before Give Yourself a Hand, and that was a thing where we transitioned from one sound to the next, and so it took a while. But yes, there are a whole bunch of other songs, many of which are even mixed, or at least partially mixed, if not fully mixed. But see, usually you make a record, or at least this is the way I make records, you make more songs than you need and you pick the best ones. And so when we put out Ooh La La, we put out the cream of the crop from all those recordings. And after we put it out, and after I started listening to the other songs, I realized that I just wasn't as fond of them as the other record, and I couldn't imagine them standing up on their own. I just thought, I really got the best ones on that other record, and if I put out the others, it's going to be kind of like the B-sides of,
Well, remember our last conversation, I mentioned Demolitions being like my second favorite album.
Well, yes.
And you were just floored by that.
That's true.
And so I'm thinking, if you think that these are just like, floor material, I'm like, I kind of want to hear this stuff. Like, when are we going to get another Crash Test Dummies album, even if you don't?
I've also kind of grown out of those songs, because it was 10 years ago. And although some of them I might keep if I was going to put out another record, I'd want to re-record them and do them in a different way. But I found that after that record came out, that record came out about the time, no, I'm not sure if I've got my time right. I might have to edit out all my humming and hawing. So when did the digital invasion start with Napster? Was that like 2000?
That was about 2000, right around the turn of the century.
Yeah. And when did Ooh La La come out?
Around 2010, I want to say.
Yeah, I think you're right. So over the course of those 10 years, the music business had been, and kind of continues to be, like, oh God, how are you going to make a living doing this? And when I make records, I lose money. That's just a simple fact, yes. We will never make back the money that we put into records in this economy, because people get their music from the internet for free. They listen to YouTube. They listen to, or they listen to Spotify, which really pays musicians almost nothing. And what's been happening with Spotify and the major labels is that the major labels have been doing deals with Spotify outside of the parameters of the artist-label relationship, and just basically taking most of the money for themselves.
No.
So we're not seeing it.
I'll say, I believe it was Demolitions. I believe Demolitions I heard it on Spotify first, maybe. But there have been.
I put Demolitions on Spotify.
Okay.
But nobody buys it. They all buy.
Well, yeah, true. I mean, I'm speaking from a major fan's perspective, and maybe not necessarily your typical average Joe who just runs across you guys on the street.
Yeah.
You guys, you could be singing into a tin can with bells and whistles, which is kind of like what Ooh La La was to an extent. It was considered a toy album.
Yes, but it took a lot of time and care and money to make that record. The toys were very useful for inventing the arrangements and writing the material on. But we went along afterwards and re-recorded a lot of what the toys were playing, because otherwise the record would have sounded very flat. It would have sounded one-dimensional. And my producer, Stuart Lerman, an amazing man, he got together musicians. I actually got together the musicians, and he worked with them, and recreated the sounds of the toys and the arrangements that they were on there. So, for example, there's a song, and comb my hair,
Which I love that song, by the way.
It's making my song. Anyways, it's got the banjo on it and all that.
What I'm famous for.
What I'm famous for, yes. So that record, that song in particular, you can hear the toy at the very top of the record, but then a whole full band comes in. Mm-hmm. And if you'd heard the whole song with just that sound at the top of the record, that loop, you would be like, this is getting old fast, believe me. Because we played that stuff back, and we had that experience, and we understood that we would have to.
It was good, though. It has a very unique sound, probably one of the most unique, albums.
Yeah.
And
but to get back to your point is, why aren't you making any more records? Well, it's because it's too expensive. It's because, you pay $50,000. If we spend $50,000 on a record, and that's easy to spend that much. because you have to hire quality musicians.
Yeah.
Or we also have Crash Test Dummies musicians who will play, without demanding large sums. But on almost all of our records, we've always brought in other people to fill things out. Even on God Shoveled His Feet, Adrian Ballou came in and played some guitar on the very last track. Adrian Ballou used to play in King Crimson, and he played with Talking Heads. He's a phenomenal guy. There's a lot of expenses that go into making a record, and there are hardly any ways at all of making that money back.
I kind of understand now. It doesn't make it any easier, but yeah. One thing I want to ask. This is something that actually has just come up in the past week. We were watching. Have you seen the movie The Spy Who Dumped Me?
No, why haven't I seen it? Because I've heard the title many a time.
Oh Lord.
Is it who made? Is it? It's not Mike Myers.
What's her name? No, it's the lady from Ghostbusters, not Melissa McCarthy. They said that she's from Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters.
Mila Kunis?
No, it's a Mila Kunis movie. But anyway, there's a scene. Oh God, I believe this is probably going to be news to you. There is a scene at the beginning where she is standing there in a bar, and she meets this man who is a spy, but she doesn't know it. And they're looking on a jukebox, and she tells him, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to find the worst song on this jukebox. And he plays
That's why I know that title.
I was like, I wasn't expecting it. And we're like, Ashley looks over at me, and my jaw was just down here on the floor. And I'm like it was a mix of like, the worst song on the jukebox, really? But what does that mean to you to have? I mean, I know it's not a negative thing. It has to be almost flattery at that point.
Well, it's a negative thing, but it's also flattering that we made that big an impression. But I will tell you that there are, it seems that Crash Test Dummies are never ignored. They're either loved or hated. We provoke a reaction with people that goes one way or another. And I know that a lot of critics that listen to Crash Test Dummies have made the remark that it's postured sort of writing, and that it's silly, and that it's kind of gimmicky, and that they only had one big song, and that there's a good reason for that. It's because they're just they're like that. They're along those lines. Those kind, and Rolling Stone magazine, although they recently announced their tour, which I was very grateful for. They were a classic example of the kind of hip reviewers that just don't like us at all. And there are people who just think that we're a flash in the pan that do stuff that's just sort of self-indulgent. And I had a guy come up to me the other day, and he said he was actually a fan coming to the show, but he said to me, when I read your lyrics, I think they're kind of silly, but they're also kind of profound.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's exactly what I want you to think. So thank you. That was, to me, the biggest compliment ever. And I think some people just hear the silly part, if that makes any sense.
They hear it, but they're not listening.
Well, for example, there's, yes, that's a very good way of putting it. That's how I would like to think it is, anyways, being the right.
We'll just call it that.
But it's just not some people's bag. And, I know what I was going to say. For example, the word pajamas appears twice on God Shuffled His Feet, the album. Pajamas in the daytime, in afternoons and coffee spoons, and no pajamas or doctors in the days of the caveman. And a lot of people take that just to be plain old silly, I think. And no one's ever pointed out to that lyric to me, but as being silly. But when I wrote that, I thought, wow, am I ever getting away with something big here? Because I'm in the context, pajamas, kind of in days of the caveman, pajamas and doctors meant you know,
Modern luxuries.
yeah, exactly. And that's what they didn't have.
So 25 years.
And then on another song, Afternoons and Coffee Spoons, someday I'll have a disappearing hairline, you know, going bald. And I'm thinking about old age in this song and not looking forward to it. Some days I'll wear pajamas in the daytime.
Do you now?
Yeah, in fact, I do. I rarely put pants on, and I sleep in my underwear. And I spend most of my days reading and doing yoga, and both those things can be done in your underwear. Actually, sometimes I have to just take a shower and put some pants on to just feel better about myself.
Totally get that. I probably wouldn't do that if I didn't do streams every day.
If you didn't do what every day?
Streams. I get on and play video games live for an audience every day.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, you do? Oh, we'll have to talk about
That, that's our main thing that we do, and then we do interviews and stuff on top of that. So we are a little bit more pressed for time this time around, so I guess we're going to go ahead and wrap.
Okay.
One more thing, really quick. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do. You know, my brother Dan, our bass player, just walked by, and he'd love to see this too, because he read the comic as well as I did. This is the original comic book. Dan, if you want to see this. This is the comic book where Superman fights Solomon Grundy that I bought. Yeah, that's the one I bought after going to the dentist, because that was, did you get that with Mom too? She'd let you have a comic after going to the dentist? There was a comic store
I got
next to the
Tic Tacs from the pharmacy.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I just got a treat for going to the dentist, and this was my treat. And I actually found Solomon Grundy terrifying at that age.
Oh, yeah.
Me too.
He was scary. He was kind of scary.
Well, I'll tell you, it was funny because right after our interview, I got on Google and I was like, I got to find out which freaking book that was. And I looked and looked. And finally, somebody pointed it out. Called up my comic book store, Infinity Flux, down there on the bottom of the screen, and said, "Hey, I need this book." And they were like, "We've got it." And I was like, "Whatever you want, just save it for me." So, yeah, I was like, I've got to get Brad's John Hancock on this. So.
Okay, no problem. And it costs $12.99.
Yeah, it's a pretty good condition copy too. So.
It looks gorgeous, actually.
Does yours look like that?
No, ours is a little more ratty-tatty. It got read 100 times at least. You know, kids read comics more than once,
Yeah.
as you probably know.
I probably would have too if I'd have got it at that age.
Are you guys still interviewing?
Yeah.
Can I look at
Sure.
it? Sorry.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap then. I'm Lonnie with Untitled Nerd Network, brought to you by Infinity Flux and your local Satanist out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts, for appearing for the second time. I think you may be the first ever second interview of a musician.
That's a good one.
It's magic. To me it is anyway. But again, thank you for coming on. And, you never know. We might be able to do this again sometime. Promise me an interview if you put out another album.
I promise.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. And also remember, Chattacon is this weekend, Chattanooga in February, as well as our Whisker Jam fundraiser concert for the Humane Educational Society. Had to get those out of the way before we cut out.